The morning air was cold, even for a busy American city. Cars moved fast, people walked faster, and no one looked twice at the small girl sitting near the school gate. She sat on the edge of the sidewalk, her knees pulled close to her chest. In her hands was a notebook, old, torn, and barely holding together. The cover was bent, the pages inside wrinkled and broken at the corners. She held it as if it were the most valuable thing she owned. Her name was Emily. Emily was only 11 years old, but her eyes looked older. They had learned how to watch quietly, how to wait, how to stay strong without asking for help. Around her, parents dropped their children at school. They talked about homework, lunch boxes, and after-school plans. Laughter filled the air. Emily heard it all, but it felt far away, like a sound from another world. She did not wear a new backpack like the others. Her shoes were clean but worn. Her jacket was a little too thin for the cold. Still, she did not complain. She never did. Emily opened her notebook carefully. One page was half torn, another had tape holding it together. Words filled every page. Some were written neatly, others rushed and uneven. These words were her safe place. When the world felt loud or unfair, she wrote. When she felt scared, she wrote. When she felt hopeful, she wrote too. A bell rang in the distance, loud and sharp. Students began to rush inside the school building. Emily stayed where she was. She looked at the notebook again and traced a finger over one sentence she had written the night before. One day, my words will matter. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. A few students passed by her. One girl glanced at the notebook and whispered something to her friend. They laughed and walked away. Emily lowered her head. She had learned that silence hurt less than words. Across the street, a man stood near a coffee shop. His name was Daniel. He was in his late 30s, wearing a simple coat and holding a paper cup in his hand. He was already late for work. His phone buzzed with messages, and his mind was full of deadlines and meetings. He was ready to cross the street when something made him stop. He noticed the girl. At first, it was not her face that caught his attention. It was the notebook. It looked out of place in a world of tablets and phones. It looked tired, almost forgotten. Daniel watched as the girl held it close, like she was afraid it might disappear. People walked past her without slowing down. Some looked. Most did not. Daniel frowned. He did not know why, but he could not turn away. He crossed the street and stood a few steps from her. Emily noticed his shadow before she noticed him. Her body stiffened. She closed the notebook quickly and hugged it to her chest. Daniel spoke gently. "Good morning." Emily nodded but did not look up. "That's a very old notebook," Daniel said, trying to sound kind, not curious. Emily's fingers tightened around the torn cover. "Yes," she said softly. Daniel waited. Silence stretched between them. He could hear the sounds of the city, the cars, the school doors closing. Something told him not to rush. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "No. School." Daniel pointed toward the building. "Yes," she answered, still not meeting his eyes. Daniel noticed the bell had already rung. "You're late." Emily nodded again. "I know." Daniel looked at the notebook one more time. He did not know why, but he felt like it was important. "May I ask what you write in there?" Emily hesitated. Her heart beat fast. People usually laughed when they found out, but something in his voice felt different. Honest. Calm. "My stories," she said. Daniel raised his eyebrows slightly. "Stories?" Emily finally looked up at him. Her eyes were serious. "Yes, they're all in there." Daniel felt something shift inside him. He did not understand it yet, but he knew this was not a normal morning. "That notebook," he said slowly, "looks like it has been through a lot." Emily looked down at it and whispered, "So have I." Daniel was silent. Then he said something he did not plan to say at all. "You know," he said, "sometimes the most broken things carry the strongest words." Emily looked at him, surprised. And in that moment, neither of them knew it yet, but that torn notebook was about to change both their lives forever. Emily did not go inside the school right away. After Daniel walked away, she stayed where she was, holding the notebook against her chest. His words echoed in her mind. No one had ever spoken about her notebook like that before. Most people saw it as trash. To her, it was her voice. She stood up slowly and walked toward the school door. The hallway was loud with footsteps and lockers slamming shut. Emily kept her head down as she moved to her classroom. When she sat at her desk, she carefully placed the torn notebook inside her bag, as if hiding a secret. The teacher began the lesson, writing long sentences on the board. Emily tried to focus, but her thoughts drifted. She remembered the night before, sitting at the small kitchen table in their apartment. The light above her flickered while her mother slept on the couch, tired from working late again. Emily had written by that weak light, telling stories about brave girls and happy endings. Her mother's name was Sarah. She worked 2 jobs and still worried every day. Bills stacked on the counter. Rent was always late. Sarah tried to smile for Emily, but the stress lived in her eyes. Emily knew this. That was why she wrote. One day, she believed her words could help them escape this life. During lunch break, Emily sat alone as usual. She opened her lunchbox. Inside was a simple sandwich and an apple. Around her, other kids laughed and shared snacks. She listened quietly. Her notebook rested in her bag, heavy like a promise she was not sure she could keep. Across the city, Daniel sat in his office, but his mind was not there. He stared at his computer screen, yet all he could see was the girl on the sidewalk. The way she protected that notebook stayed with him. Daniel worked in publishing. He had seen hundreds of writers, many confident, many loud, all wanting to be noticed. Emily was different. She did not ask for attention. She carried her dream in silence. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He told himself it was none of his business. Still, something pulled at him. He remembered why he had chosen this career in the first place. It was not money or titles. It was stories. Real ones. Back at school, the day dragged on for Emily. In English class, the teacher announced a writing assignment. Write a short story about something that matters to you, she said. A few students groaned. Emily's heart began to race. This was her world. She waited until she got home that afternoon. Their apartment smelled like old coffee and soap. Her mother was not home yet. Emily sat at the table and took out her notebook. She flipped through the torn pages until she found a blank space. There were not many left. She began to write. She wrote about a girl who felt invisible, a girl who carried hope in broken things, a girl who believed kindness could change fate. Her pencil moved fast, almost shaking. She did not notice the time passing. When Sarah came home, she found Emily still writing. "Did you eat?" she asked softly. Emily nodded. "Yes, Mom." Sarah looked at the notebook and smiled tiredly. "Still writing your stories?" "Yes," Emily said. "One day, they will matter." Sarah did not answer. She kissed Emily's head and went to change. She wanted to believe, but life had taught her to be careful with hope. That night, Daniel found himself doing something strange. He opened an old drawer and pulled out a notebook from his own past. It was filled with ideas he never followed, dreams he once had but let go of. He sat quietly, thinking about Emily. He whispered to himself, "What if she is real talent?" The next morning, Emily returned to the sidewalk before school. She sat in the same place, holding the notebook again. This time, her heart was beating faster. She did not know why, but she felt like something was coming. Across the street, Daniel slowed his steps. Their paths were about to cross again, and neither of them understood yet how much courage it would take to speak the next words. The next morning, Emily waited on the sidewalk again, but Daniel did not appear. She told herself it did not matter. He was just a stranger. Still, her eyes kept moving to the street. Each passing car made her heart jump, then fall. School felt heavier that day. Emily handed in her writing assignment with shaking hands. The teacher collected the papers without looking at her. Emily sat back down and stared at her desk, wondering if her words would disappear like they always did. During recess, 2 girls walked past her table. One of them pointed at Emily's bag. "Is that the broken notebook?" she asked loudly. The other laughed. Why does she even try? Emily felt her face burn. She wanted to say something, but no sound came. She grabbed her bag and walked away, fighting the tears in her eyes. Outside, she sat on the steps and opened her notebook. One page had torn loose. She pressed it back in place with care, like fixing a small wound. At the same time, Daniel stood inside a small bookstore near his office. He had not planned to go there. His feet had brought him without asking. He walked between the shelves, touching book spines, breathing in the smell of paper. He stopped in front of the children's section and smiled sadly. He thought about Emily's voice. Quiet, but strong. Daniel bought a notebook. It was simple, with a blue cover and clean pages. As he paid, doubt crept in. What if he was wrong? What if he gave her hope and it broke her? After school, Emily walked home alone. Clouds covered the sky, and cold wind brushed her face. She thought about quitting. Maybe writing was just a dream meant for other people. People with money. People with confidence. When she reached the apartment, her mother was waiting. Sarah held an envelope in her hand. "The electric bill," she said quietly. "We're behind again." Emily nodded. She went to her room and sat on the bed. She opened her notebook and read her own words, searching for comfort. Instead, fear filled her chest. Dreams felt dangerous when real life was so heavy. That evening, there was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it, surprised to see a man standing there. Daniel held the blue notebook in his hands. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "I met your daughter yesterday." Emily froze in the hallway. Daniel knelt to Emily's level. "I couldn't stop thinking about your stories," he said gently. "I don't know if this will help, but I wanted you to have this." He held out the notebook. Emily stared at it, afraid to touch it. "Why?" she whispered. "Because someone once believed in me," Daniel answered. "And I didn't listen. I don't want you to make the same mistake." Emily reached out slowly and took the notebook. Her hands trembled. Daniel stood. "I would like to read your writing," he said. "Only if you want." Emily looked at her mother. Sarah saw something she had not seen in a long time. Hope. Emily nodded. That night, Emily stayed awake, copying her best story into the new notebook. Each word felt lighter, safer. Across the city, Daniel read her pages, his eyes filling with tears. Something real had begun. The world outside kept moving, unaware of the quiet change taking place. No headlines were written. No applause was heard. Yet a seed had been planted. Emily slept with the new notebook beside her, feeling less alone. Daniel closed his light late that night, thinking about responsibility. He knew belief was fragile. It needed patience, time, and honesty. Tomorrow, challenges would come. Doubt would return. But for now, hope rested quietly between torn pages and clean ones. It was small, but it was alive. And sometimes, that is enough to change a life, then another, and maybe a future no one could yet see. The story was far from over, and the next steps would test them both. But courage had already entered the room, quietly, gently, and without asking permission from fear, failure, or the past at all. Emily woke before the alarm. Morning light slipped through the thin curtains, painting soft lines across her room. The blue notebook rested beside her pillow. For a moment, she wondered if the night before had been a dream. Then she touched the smooth cover, and her heart felt steady again. At school, whispers followed her. Some students noticed the new notebook. Others noticed her quiet confidence. In English class, the teacher returned the writing assignments. When Emily's paper landed on her desk, a red note sat at the top. "See me after class," it said. Her stomach tightened. After the bell rang, Emily walked slowly to the teacher's desk. "Yes?" she asked. The teacher adjusted her glasses. "Your story is strong," she said, "but it feels unfinished. Like you're holding back." Emily nodded. She always held back. "I want you to read it aloud tomorrow," the teacher added. Emily's breath caught. "In front of everyone?" "Yes," the teacher said gently. "Your words deserve to be heard." Emily left the room shaking. That afternoon, Daniel called. He asked how she was doing. Emily told him the truth. "I'm scared," she said. Daniel listened. "Being scared means you care," he replied. "But don't let fear decide for you." That evening, Sarah watched Emily write again, faster than before. "You don't have to push yourself," Sarah said softly. "I do," Emily answered. "This matters." The next day arrived too soon. Emily stood at the front of the classroom, holding the blue notebook. Her hands felt cold. Faces stared back at her. Some bored, some curious, some unkind. She began to read. At first, her voice shook. Then the words took over. She read about a girl who felt invisible but refused to disappear. She read about hope living in broken places. The room grew quiet. Even the students who laughed before now listened. When she finished, no one spoke. Then one student clapped. Then another. The teacher smiled. But not everyone was pleased. Later that day, the principal called Emily to the office. Sarah sat beside her, worried. The principal folded his hands. "We received a complaint," he said. "A parent feels your story was inappropriate. Too emotional. Too personal." Emily stared at the floor. "We encourage creativity," the principal continued. "But we must be careful." Careful sounded like stop. Outside the office, Sarah hugged Emily. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "No matter what." That night, Daniel received an email from his company. Budget cuts. Projects canceled. The small chance he had hoped for suddenly felt fragile. He stared at Emily's pages again. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. Belief could hurt if it failed. He almost didn't call, but he did. Sometimes, Daniel said slowly, the world pushes back when something true appears. Emily nodded, though he couldn't see her. Does that mean I should stop? No, Daniel answered. It means you're close. Emily slept poorly that night. Doubt crept in, loud and sharp. By morning, she had made a choice. She placed the torn notebook and the blue one together in her bag. At school, she walked past the gate, past the sidewalk where everything began. She felt smaller, then stronger. Inside the classroom, she opened the blue notebook and wrote one sentence. I will not erase myself. Across the city, Daniel sent an email he had been afraid to send. He attached Emily's story and pressed send. Nothing happened right away, but something had shifted. The cost of belief had been paid in fear, courage, and quiet strength. And sometimes, that payment opens doors no one expects, even when the waiting feels endless and the future remains unseen. Emily checked her phone every morning, though she knew no message would come for her. Still, she checked. Hope had become a habit she could not break. Days passed after Daniel sent the email. Nothing changed on the outside. School continued. Homework piled up. Bills still worried her mother. Yet something inside Emily stayed awake, like a light refusing to turn off. At school, reactions to her reading slowly shifted. A boy who once laughed asked, "Did you really write that?" A girl slid into the seat beside her during lunch and said nothing, but stayed. Small things, but they mattered. Emily learned that words could move quietly, without asking permission. Daniel, meanwhile, waited with growing tension. He refreshed his inbox more times than he liked to admit. His company had frozen new projects, and his position felt uncertain. He wondered if he had done the wrong thing. Was it fair to give a child hope when he could not promise an outcome? One evening, his phone rang. It was an editor he respected deeply. Her voice was calm, but curious. "Where did you find this writer?" she asked. Daniel's heart jumped. "She's 11, he said carefully. "And she's real." There was a pause. "That's what surprised me," the editor replied. "The voice feels honest. Untouched. We don't see that often." Daniel closed his eyes. "We'd like to meet her," the editor continued. "And her parent." That night, Daniel called Emily and Sarah. Emily listened quietly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. When Daniel finished speaking, the room was silent. "Does this mean?" Emily asked. "It means someone wants to hear more," Daniel said. "That's all. No promises." Sarah covered her mouth, tears forming. She nodded again and again, unable to speak. The meeting was set for the following week. Emily spent days rewriting, reading, doubting, and rewriting again. She feared ruining everything. Sarah reminded her to breathe. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "Just be you." The day arrived. The office building was tall and clean, filled with glass and light. Emily felt small walking inside. She carried the blue notebook tightly, with the torn one safely in her bag. The editor greeted them kindly. She spoke to Emily directly, not down to her. "Why do you write?" she asked. Emily thought for a moment. "Because if I don't," she said softly, "I feel like I disappear." The editor nodded, understanding. They talked for an hour. No contracts. No big words. Just stories, questions, and listening. When it ended, the editor smiled. "Keep writing," she told Emily. "No matter what happens next." Outside, Emily felt both light and empty. "Did I do okay?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "You were brave," he said. "That's more than okay." Weeks passed again. This time, waiting felt heavier. Emily returned to the sidewalk some mornings, sitting quietly before school, writing for herself. Daniel watched from across the street once, unseen, feeling something close to pride. Then, on a rainy afternoon, Sarah answered a call that changed everything. The editor offered a small publishing deal. A children's collection. Slow, careful, real. Sarah cried openly. Emily sat still, shocked. That night, Emily placed the torn notebook on her desk. She opened it to the first page, worn and nearly loose. She whispered, "We made it." Not in victory, but in gratitude. Daniel stood in his apartment later, holding his old notebook again. For the first time in years, he opened it and began to write. Because belief, once proven, does not end. It grows. The book was released quietly, without noise or celebration. There were no big posters, no cameras, no crowds. It sat on a small shelf in a local bookstore, its cover simple, its title gentle. Emily visited the store with her mother on a Saturday morning, her heart beating faster with every step. She stood in front of the shelf and stared. Her name was printed there, small but real. Sarah placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Neither of them spoke. Words felt too heavy and too small at the same time. Emily picked up the book and opened it. Inside were stories born from late nights, weak lights, and silent hope. She touched the pages slowly, remembering every moment they came from. The torn notebook was still in her bag. She had not left it behind. She never would. Over time, letters arrived. Some from children, some from parents. They spoke of feeling seen, of finding comfort, of words that stayed with them after the last page. Emily read each letter carefully. She answered some. Others she kept close, like proof that voices matter, even quiet ones. At school, things changed, but not in loud ways. Teachers listened more. Students asked questions. Emily was still shy, still quiet, but she no longer felt invisible. When she read or wrote, she stood a little taller. Daniel watched from a distance, careful not to step into the spotlight. He attended one small reading, standing at the back of the room. When Emily spoke, her voice was steady. Daniel felt something loosen inside him. The doubt he had carried finally rested. After the reading, Emily walked up to him. She handed him something wrapped in paper. Inside was the torn notebook. "I want you to have it," she said. Daniel shook his head. "It belongs to you." Emily smiled. "It started with me," she said. "But you helped it grow." Daniel accepted it with care. Years passed. Emily grew older. She kept writing. Not every story was published. Not every dream came easily. Life remained complicated, but the fear of disappearing never returned. She knew now that her voice had weight. One evening, as a teenager, Emily returned to the same sidewalk near the school gate. The city looked different, but the ground felt familiar. She sat and opened a new notebook, watching people pass. Most did not notice her. She smiled. Across the street, a young boy sat alone, drawing in a book with a cracked cover. Emily noticed him. She stood and crossed the street. "That's a nice notebook," she said gently. The boy looked up, surprised. "It's broken," he replied. Emily sat beside him. "So was mine," she said. She did not promise him anything. She did not give advice. She only listened. That night, Daniel placed the torn notebook on a shelf beside his desk. He opened it one last time and read Emily's early words. They reminded him that belief does not need permission. It only needs courage to begin. Emily went on to live a full life, shaped by stories. Some big, some small. She learned that kindness is often quiet, that change often begins unseen, and that broken things can carry the strongest truths. The torn notebook was never repaired. It did not need to be. Its damage was part of its meaning. And long after the first story was written, the lesson remained simple and clear. Notice, listen, believe. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one person willing to stop, one moment of kindness, and one voice brave enough to speak from torn pages into the open world.